Okay, let's cut some fabric. I try to always cut my background fabric first because it is boring and I like to get it out of the way. So I'm going to cut I have 2 quilts worth of background fabric to cut. I'm going to cut this one from Yardage. This is Mode Grunge. And I looked at the pattern and I have plenty of low volume strips from the poppy seeds jelly rolls to cut my background fabric. So I'm gonna do it. So we're gonna have multicolored dots on our background fabric for that quilt. That makes that a little bit more economical. So here's my grunge fabric. I have it folded in half. So it comes folded in half with the selvage touching. Here's that fold right here, and I folded it again. Now we're in quarters. I'm going to be cutting all my fabric with my trusty Striplogy ruler. I'm a supplies minimalist when it comes to quilting supplies, but this is one of the first things I would replace if it broke. This is the Striplogy XL ruler. Definitely get the XL. So I need to cut 15 with the fabric strips, which this makes it really easy. I've got my rotary cutter right here. If you don't have a sharp blade on your rotary cutter, this is a good time to replace it before you're cutting the whole project. The fold lined up with a horizontal line here. This first cut just squares up the edge of the fabric, and then every time there's a square, that's a 2.5 inch mark. So if you don't like numbers, you don't even have to look at them. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I need 7 more strips. Square up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me make sure I cut all the way through there. Yeah, I did. 7. I have my 15 width of fabric strips cut, and now I'm going to subcut them into 2.5 inch squares. So I'm going to show you how to make this really fast. So I'm going to stack 2 of these at a time. That makes it 4 strips of fabric. Make sure that they are straight and folded and even and all that good stuff. Okay, now I'm going to line up my strips with the lines on my cutting mat, and this is just so that I can keep them lined up relative to each other. I'm not going to use the cutting mat as a cutting guide, but I want them to be parallel to each other. Notice I don't cut off my selvage first because I can just cut it off right now. Okay, so this is 8 strips. I'm going to line up here, the top, and I'm going to make sure all of these have a horizontal line that lines up with them. I need to cut 16 pieces, 16 squares from each strip. Move this down a little bit. The important thing when cutting through all of these is that you make sure that nothing slips. So you want to make sure you're putting plenty of pressure on the ruler, but also not cutting any of your fingers off. So that's the tricky thing. Okay, so I've squared up. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing. Well, probably I'll do 71, but I'll probably just stack me on these. So there is all of my background fabric for one quilt. Okay, quilt number 2. I'm going to be using these, which are already cut. So now I just need to subcut them into squares. So these are pinked, which means the edges are ziggity zaggitied, which I think universally everyone finds annoying. But, you know, for practical purposes and not having the fabric threads unravel in the jelly roll, which would also be very annoying. I understand the purpose, but doesn't mean I like it. So I'm just gonna, I did press these since they were rolled up in a jelly roll. The edges were all folded down. So I'm gonna do this just like I cut the other ones. I'm gonna do 8 and then I'll do 7. Okay, so to line up with the thing, the way I treat pinked edges is I treat them kind of as the middle of the, between the peak and the valley of the pinked edge is where I treat as the edge. It usually works pretty well. So I'm kind of lining these up so that they overlap with the peak of the pinked edge. That's a tongue twister. Just a little bit. It doesn't really matter. What I care about is that they're parallel. And so that I end up with cut squares and not with cut parallelograms or trapezoids. I'm going to make sure all my edges are lined up all right. Oh, this one's not. And kind of pull it up a little bit. And I'm going to try to mix these up as much as possible so that they're more random. Their placement is more random in the quilt. Some of these you'll notice are a little bit more off-white and some of them are whiter. As long as your feature fabrics are nowhere close to those colors, it doesn't really matter at all to me. Maybe it matters to you, that's fine. Doesn't matter to me. So let's line these up. So that's all my background fabric for 2 quilts, and it took about not very long. So the letter in the pattern refers to the placement of the fabric in the block, and I had some questions about how to distribute the fabrics. So what I'm going to do is I need 12. I'm making the lap size quilt, so I need 12 of each jelly roll to make A, B, C, and D. So I'm just going to, my fabrics are in rainbow order-ish. So I'm just going to go through and say A, B, C, D so that I make sure that I'm getting good color variety in each, for each letter. And some of the strips I have 2 pieces and some I have 3 pieces of, but it doesn't have to be exactly equal. I'm just trying to get good variety. So I'm just going to go through the whole thing and do A, B, C, D. Now, if you have fabrics that have more of a print and you want to hide the seams in that print, you're going to want to put them as B, but these don't matter, so, which is nice. Okay, there we go. So I've got my A, B, C, and D. So I'm going to set these aside and I'm going to cut my A fabrics first. Okay, because I need an odd number of pieces from each fabric, I'm actually going to open them up. So I'm going to stack them 4 at a time. But that's just 4 layers since it's now just opened all the way up. So when I'm cutting pieces, especially if I'm using a pre-cut or something where I know I'm going to have I do not have extra fabric if I make a mistake, I like to cut my biggest pieces first to make sure, one, that I have room, but also that if I make a mistake, then I can cut that bigger piece down into a smaller piece and possibly still have enough. If I can't make a smaller piece bigger, if I make a mistake, then I can make a bigger piece smaller. Okay, now I'm gonna line them up with the lines on the cutting board. I'm gonna cut my rectangular pieces first, and I need 5 of them. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I need to straighten these out again since I'm now cutting the part that was hanging off the table. I need 5 of each again. So let's line them up again. If you don't like lining up the strips like this, cut them on their own. That's fine. I don't particularly love it, but it does save time. If you don't want to deal with the fold on the jelly roll, these are ones I cut so it's not so foldy. You can flip your jelly roll around so that your scrap piece is the fold instead of the other end. All right, we're at C. I'm gonna leave these ones folded because there's enough wiggle room here. I know that from a width of fabric strip, you can get 16 2.5-inch squares, and I only need 15. If I leave these folded, it's just gonna save me some time, and then I'll pre-cut a 2.5-inch square scrap for future use. If you have a fabric with that you really want to hide the seams on, C would be the worst place to put it. It has the most seams hidden. D would be the other worst place to put a fabric with a lot of seams in it. So first choice B, second choice A, third and fourth choice C and D. All right, there's my D fabrics. I'm gonna go eat some lunch and I'll cut my poppy seed strips. Okay, now I'm gonna cut my fabric for my poppy seeds quilt. I'm gonna start by doing my ABCD piles again. This time I'm gonna make sure, I didn't put my fabrics in rainbow order, but I'm gonna make sure that I have a mix of like lighter and darker in each pile. Okay, now that I have all my fabrics sorted, I'm just going to look through and make sure that I have some lighter and some darker ones in each pile. Yep, looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to cut just like I did with the other ones. I'm going to cut these exactly the same way, so I'm not going to make you sit through the whole thing. But if you have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments.